And now we welcome our guest speaker, Chris Loken.
Good morning. Terry, I think, has told you all about me, so there's half my speech gone. Anyway, she asked me if I would speak to you folks this morning. Trace, if you will, she said, your spiritual journey to the making of your film. That was not difficult for me, for I was already there. You see, my early beginnings were not that much different from those of the immigrant children. As Harry said, I was born in 1932, one of 8 children, on a small rocky farm in Wisconsin, which we lost in the Great Depression. My parents were first-generation Norwegian-American immigrants. My father's family was relatively large landowners in Norway. My mother was of the so-called peasant or commoner class. Of course, none of this old country class status meant anything in America, where, as you well know, we are all created equal, theoretically. But this ballyhooed equality didn't help us much when we lost our farm. We had a government mortgage, but speculators found a loophole and started buying up these mortgages. And one of them foreclosed on us one sunny spring morning. I was 8 years old at the time. I was pulling weeds in the vegetable garden alongside our driveway. A big, fancy Essex car drove in our yard. I can still see that car. It was big and long and black, and a big, portly man with a handlebar mustache, the villain, just like you see in the old movies, got out of his fancy car and approached my father, who was just walking from the barn to the milk house carrying a pail of milk. The big man had a sheaf of important-looking papers in his hands. He held them out to my father and said something, not all of which I could hear. But I did hear words like mortgage and you got to move, Helmer. And this is my farm now. My father set down his milk pail, took the papers in his hands, looked at them. He couldn't read English very well. He had only gone to school to the 3rd grade. He had to come home to help his father on the farm. I even knew then what this was all about. I had been overhearing my pa and ma talk about this mortgage and foreclosure, and we just ain't got the money. See, we and my little brothers, my folks would be talking in bed at night as they lay there, and me and my 2 little brothers slept in a trundle bed at the foot end of their bed. They talked about this most every night when they thought we were asleep. Talked in low, scary voices. But I was hardly ever asleep. I was too scared to sleep. But now, this really scary day had finally arrived. Pa had the official-looking papers in his hands. The big man got back in his big fancy car and drove out his driveway now. And Pa was left standing there, tears running down his face. It was the only time I ever saw Pa cry. I was crying too. Our whole family was crying. But we still had enough gumption left to pile our meager household belongings, crates of chickens and pigs, odds and ends of this and that, on a hay wagon pulled by our horses, Buck and Bob, us perched on top of whatever would hold us, chairs, straw tick mattresses, the pig crates, driving what few cattle we had left ahead of us. I was so ashamed that we had lost our farm that I hid under the daybed. When we passed our neighbor's farm, I could not come out from under that bed. I figured they must be richer, smarter than us, for they still had their farms. We just weren't good enough, I guess, to keep ours. You folks ever see The Grapes of Wrath? Read the novel? That was us, Wisconsin Okies. I tell you this now so you might know that at the age of 8, I already had an affinity for the plight of our present-day immigrants. And we weren't even illegal. We were just dirt poor, scared, afraid some banker or half-assed official would come in the middle of the night, or even on a lovely spring morning in April, much like the one we have outside today, and take our land, leave us homeless, our spirits crushed, our confidence shaken, our American dream shattered. As we so sadly see many of our immigrants today. So, when I grew up and made my way in this oft-time cruel world, I still occasionally have nightmares from those scary nights and that foreclosure day. But I still managed to make something of myself, and along with my lovely wife, Randy, we got a few bucks together, put a down payment on a fruit farm in the Hudson River Valley, as Terry mentioned. Likely, the primary reason I bought that farm was to exorcise the shame of my family having lost that first farm some 30 years before. For I was, by all accounts, including my brothers and sisters and the rest of my family, about the last guy on earth who should even think of becoming a farmer. But somehow, Randy and I persevered. She, a top New York model, and me, an actor-writer. Anybody remember Green Acres? The hapless Eddie Albert and Zsa Zsa Gabor? Yeah. Well, that was us. But eventually we learned what we had to know and built LoveApple Farm into the landmark fruit farm of the area. We never could have done without the immigrants. Never. We were having a hell of a time trying to get the job done with American workers and was about ready to throw in the towel when migrant workers, migrant Mexicans, started showing up. First a single here and there, single man, then their cousins, uncles, brothers, fathers. So we built a labor camp for the single men and later added mobile homes when families began to arrive. One of those families was the one that I utilized as prototypes for the movie. That is not to say that this family, called the Salazars, are exactly that family, but rather a composite of various immigrant families we felt would best speak to the subject matter, namely the illegal immigration controversy. Now, I know I'm being politically incorrect for using the word illegal, but I do it purposely. For until we actually get these draconian laws changed, they are officially illegal. And if enough people are ashamed or embarrassed by this terminology, maybe enough people will find a way to correct it legally. It's a familiar story in the news night and day, superficially. But how did this controversy come about? We bought our farm in 1969, and the Mexicans started arriving not all that long after. There was no talk of legal or illegal in those early days. We were just glad to have them, get our crops picked, the market on time. Apparently our government was also glad to have them, for I never heard a peep about arresting them or deporting them or them taking the jobs of American citizens until the recession of the 80s. Then suddenly their lack of documentation became an issue. Prior to that, it was common practice for migrant Mexicans, primarily from northeastern Mexico, to make the short journey up into Florida to pick peaches in Georgia, and they'd go up there till they finally got to New York to pick apples in the fall. Then, as farms grew larger and more prosperous, largely because of the contributions of the immigrants, and there were fewer and fewer Americans willing to get out there in that cold snow to prune the apple orchards, more and more Mexicans started to stay over in the winter to do the pruning, and then into the spring for the planting. Soon they were there all year round, missing their families missing them. So it was only natural that their families would arrive. The farmers would start to supply housing. Mama and Papa Mexico would start having more babies. These babies, by law, U.S. citizens. But Papa and Mama were not, nor were the children they brought with them from Mexico. Thus, our current dilemma: illegal parents, legal children. The very dilemma that our movie, Fighting for Freedom, addresses. A dilemma that I saw coming many years before and finally wrote 10 years ago in the first draft of our movie, which became 8 more drafts over the next 5 years while we tried to raise the money to get our film done. We thought it an important movie, so important that Randy and I finally put up 80% of the budget to get it made. Important as an awareness tool, one that should be seen by our citizens. Not only to entertain, but to educate. I don't think most of our citizens understand what this illegal immigrant controversy is all about. I still don't think they know. Likely 90% of the populace doesn't even know an immigrant personally. Don't realize what truly good people most of them are. How desperately our country needs them to get our manual labor done. What exemplary citizens most of them would be if they were given a chance. A chance that was freely given to wave after wave of other immigrants from any number of other countries who had come before them, including my own, Norway. So we made the movie, but apparently only a few of us really want to know what this controversy is all about. Want to really get to know this particular batch of immigrants. The studios, the movie chains, big business, politicians, our citizens, even the immigrant organizations, nobody really wanted to touch this illegal immigration controversy with a 10-foot pole. They still don't. Sure, they give it lip service. The polls show that the majority of our citizens support President Obama's executive order, allowing illegal immigrant parents of citizen children some path to legality. But then our do-nothing Congress, supposedly there to legislate the will of their constituents, refuse to enact his executive order into law. Yet their constituents, us, you and me, continue to vote these gutless wonders back into office year after year. Of course, Randy, myself, Tanya, Kristana, our daughters, we know many of these immigrant children well. They were born and raised on LoveApple Farm. Our girls grew up with them, played with them, went to school with them, loved them. As we did, still do. Randy and I called them our grandchildren, and in many ways treated them as such. We all lived the good times together and the bad. Our farm was raided once before, back in the late 90s. ICE swooped in and took our Mexican families, put the fathers in jail. I had to put up $5,000 a head to bail them out. Then, through my contacts, pulling a few strings here and there, agreeing to pay their way back to Mexico, was able to get them deported without prejudice. Therefore, the following spring, I was able to bring them back under the H-2A farm worker visa program, which worked quite well until 9/11, as you will see in our film. You see, we are all basically in the same symbiotic boat. We can't get on without them, and they can't get on without us. Now, it's those scared children that lay sleepless at night, hearing their parents say much the same scary words I heard when I was their age some 80 years ago. Will they put us in jail? Well, this is our home. We've lived here for 30 years. They can't do that to us now, after all we've done for them. But yes, they can and they will. They've done it before and they will do it again, unless we, as a body politic, rise up and stop them. Put together a voice that will ring loud and clear and strong enough to stop them from doing so. Vote them out of office. Believe me, if President Obama's executive order doesn't become law before the next presidential election, and Congress remains the same or becomes even more anti-immigrant, and the next president is equally anti-immigrant, our farms and our small businesses and even our homes will be raided again and again and again. If not actually, emotionally, spiritually. And who knows what will happen to our immigrants then. Thank you.